Welcome to Questions We're Afraid to Ask.
Welcome back, everybody. So, got an interesting question this week. What's it like to run a podcast? It's been a year. This experiment's been a year, and it snuck up on us, and we didn't have a specific topic this week, so we're going to talk about like what the experience has been like. If you're curious about what it's, if you've ever thought about running a podcast, what's it like? What's it been like? And it's been a lot of fun. That's what it's been like. And it's been eye-opening in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it wasn't what I expected. Well, I mean, we went into this initially like, let's do this, I think we said 50, and we're at 30? We've recorded 36 at this point, but they're not all out yet. So,
and we had an unrealistic goal of one a week every week for the whole year, and then life happened, and so we did pretty good. We did more than one every 2 weeks. Yeah,
we didn't do bad. But yeah, so there's it. I don't know. It's been interesting to sort of see once you start having people say yes to coming and talking to you about something. You're like, oh, I can ask anybody. Like,
yeah, because we had some ideas, and we love every guest that we've had on, but we heavily leaned on people we knew in the beginning, right? Friends, acquaintances, family members, and then we started like sending emails out to people, and it really the first big breaks for us were YouTubers, right? Those were the first people we didn't know who said yes, and then we got into this whole creator conversation series, which has been a lot more fun than I think we thought it would be. I mean, we wanted to interview the people we wanted to interview, but like just interviewing people about like what it is to do the creation stuff they did was much more fascinating than I think we both thought it was going to be.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and then we and so then there's sort of been this like we had Ashton on. That was that was sort of the first, when I saw numbers and I was like, oh wow, that was a big spike.
Semi-viral for us, right?
Yeah. And so we did that, and we're seeing people coming back. Clearly there's people sort of somewhat making their way through the catalog, I guess you would call it.
Yeah, we see like a little spike for a new one, and then we start to see like episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, episode 4, episode 5, 6. And people, the older episodes are getting numbers, not like huge numbers, but they're not being ignored, which is neat.
Yeah, which is interesting. Well, I think there's also something to the idea of like, someone actually wants to hear what I have to say about something. Like someone's actually listening. That's a.
And I don't know if we talked about this, but that's kind of how this started, right? I have a long commute, and I have an hour to kill each way, and you and I would have conversations. Like a lot of times 2 or 3 times a week, I'd get on the phone, either headed into work, usually into work, right? Because you just dropped your kids off and you've got time to kill before work, and you get on the phone, and I think you mentioned it's like, I wonder if anybody else is interested in what we're talking about. We're like, let's try it, and apparently some people are.
And then you see, and then it was you had reached out to a few YouTubers who we'd had come on. And it was, when we sort of talked about it on the Ashton episode a bit as well, but like I saw him on another podcast and went, boy, he got a bad shake. I wish, I could have talked to him. And then I went, well, I guess I can talk to him. Like, there's nothing stopping me. And so
the only thing stopping
being able to get onto someone's radar is a whole nother thing. But I jumped into one of his YouTube live streams and threw a couple comments in, and he responded, and I was like, oh, he's actually like reading. I can, and just said, hey, and he, Ashton has been spectacular. But you start to see that there is a larger community out there of people who are interested in these things.
I had an aha moment like that today, actually, because my youngest son and I listen to one of my favorite podcasts, and I love that he's into this. It's called Monsters Among Us with Derek Hayes. And he, in collaboration with somebody else, has been working on a documentary film, and it just came out, or it's getting ready to come out like tomorrow on Apple TV Plus and Prime and a whole bunch of different places. And I was listening to like a week or two ago's podcast of his. I was driving with my kid, and he was like, he made the statement, if there's anybody out there, because he'd been on several podcasts promoting the film, and he goes, if there's any other of your second favorite podcasts out there that you'd like to see us on, have them reach out. And I went, that'd be cool. Wait, he just literally asked for people. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm going to email him tomorrow and be like, hey, do you want to come on and talk about the podcast on our little podcast? And his is huge. I mean, it's a massive podcast. But just like, I was literally like, yeah, that would be, it'd be cool. Who would I recommend him to? I'm like, I have a podcast.
Yeah.
It's been a podcast, but I have a podcast.
Well, and I start thinking about things like, and we've reached out to some people, but just like, man, you could almost get into, citizen journalism sort of thing. Like, I want to talk to my local representative, or, maybe I could talk to a political candidate, or, you start to, and then you have to go like, okay, all right, we've got an audience of people who listen to us, so I don't want to just go bananas out. You sort of want to keep a focus, and I think we're on this kind of ancient civilization, ancient knowledge, human evolution seems to be definitely one sort of venue that we've been going down.
But there's other stuff we want to do. Well, there's other stuff we want to do, and we've run into an interesting situation, which I absolutely respect where the people are coming from. But we know we want to talk about law enforcement in America. We know we want to talk about education in America. We want to talk to teachers. We've wanted to talk to several of these types of people. And we know several teachers. We know several cops. And everyone has had the same answer. I'd love to come on, but I'm afraid I'd lose my job. So we're trying to figure out, what is a way where we can talk to people and still present the information without necessarily bringing somebody on and costing them their job.
And so we've got
a livelihood, and this is our hobby, right?
We've got two ideas on that. I mean, it definitely can happen, because there was the Hutto teacher who went on Kill Tony and told some jokes and lost his job, and I mean, I think he knew it was coming, to be fair. I think he said it during the set. They were like, do you still work there? And he's like, maybe after this, And I absolutely understand where a corporation is coming from. Pick some big box store. Like, if you are a representative of some big box store, you can't go out and talk smack about that company, or even
absolutely
about other companies, because you as an employee, even outside of business hours, you are still a representative of that company, and you have to be aware of that.
Same reason we don't talk about the stuff we do.
Exactly.
Right?
So we don't talk about where it is, so that there's no connection. It doesn't link anything. But when you've got someone like a police officer or an educator, you run. So we've got two ideas.
Semi-public figure, right? Semi-public figure.
And we want to talk about what public figures are too. We can get on that here in a second. But we can do two things. One we thought about was interviewing someone, going in with a bunch of questions, asking a bunch of questions, recording it for ourselves so we can take notes, contemporary, and then getting rid of it, obviously. And then we have a discussion about it and sort of talk about, like, well, here's what I was asking, and here's what I heard, and here's my thoughts on it. I mean, we can do it. If that's the only way we can make it happen, will happen. I think the other option is trying to do the old,
the
60 minutes
thing.
Or,
well, the Bob Lazar. The Bob Lazar thing. That was the first famous one I saw.
Don't even need to do that. We can just drop them off and have them be audio only.
Yeah.
But then just do an audio change on that. And I'm sure there's some software out there I can find to help do that.
My only concern with that, and because we're just kind of talking through what it's like to podcast, my only concern with that is if it's a specific school district or department, there may be information that is traceable back to who's talking about it.
Well, and that would be on the person talking to be careful about what you say when you say things. And we would obviously be like, yeah, go, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Cut it out. Cool.
Yeah. But those are the ideas we have. So if you're listening and you're a teacher or you're in law enforcement and you would like to come on, please let us know, right? Our email address is in the show notes, and you can get a hold of us.
Afraid to ask at proton.me.
Yeah, afraid to ask at proton.me.
Yep. And so it's interesting. I really want to talk to an educator now after I'm working through Abigail Schreier's book right now about bad therapy. And she's talking a lot about the therapeutic ideas and interventions that are being applied at schools by people who aren't trained to apply these things correctly, and the issues and concerns that can come from that. Like, it's just interesting to sort of,
and that also ties into a topic we want to do, which is therapy, which is another strange thing about the podcast is like, we've been able to book people pretty quick, but now we're getting people who are saying yes, but we're booking months out because of schedule. And that's like, ooh, this isn't just a little, let's do it every Monday night hobby anymore,
Yeah.
We've got one coming up, which took some scheduling. We interviewed someone through time travel, right? Kind of, right? But
that will already have come out by the time this one comes out.
That's right. So we were able to interview someone via time travel because they were in Australia and we were here, and it was Saturday morning at 8 a.m. for them, and it was Friday at 6 p.m. for us, and it worked great.
And it was a great conversation too. I really, we're gonna have her come back on and talk more about. I want to talk to one of, I think she said like line operators, or I don't remember what the term was, but I want to talk about. I'd love to have someone like give me a little primer lesson on like how power moves around the grid, because I understand how like electrons move through a copper wire, but like beyond that, I don't understand how that
I understand
other
like
stuff works.
Simple circuits and how they apply to a large macro level.
Yeah.
Because policies in my life, and Tracy did a great job laying all that out for us without having a background in electrical engineering. She's just been in the in that field for a while. But yeah, I'd love to know more about that. I'd love to talk about a line tech. I'd love to know why is it so expensive to put cabling underground as above ground? What's the better one? Why did the transformers blow up so easy? Why aren't we repairing them or replacing them more often? There's all kinds of stuff about that. I'd like to know.
Why does a transformer blow? Like just in general, like what's I sort of understand. I'm assuming it's like a capacitor that overfills and it pops, but like I would love to understand that in a bit more,
it was fascinating when Tracy talked about why the power poles caught on fire, right? The dust building up, and then the heat and the electricity just, spontaneous combustion almost, or at least it looks like it.
That may have been a separate conversation.
That was after I stayed on and talked. I stayed on and talked to her afterward
for a while.
But she was telling me, she said that one of the reasons that they get poles that just look like they spontaneously combust is there's a lot of dirt and dust and stuff that builds up between the insulator and the top of the pole.
Oh, it's got to create a static charge.
The heat and the static electricity. I don't remember exactly what she said, but something happens that ignites that dust. And in a dry area like Western Australia, it's like a matchstick.
Yeah.
So I forget that I stayed on and talked to her for almost 2 hours after we stopped.
Quite a bit longer. Yeah. So I think the result here is we've done this for a year now. I think we're going to keep doing this.
Absolutely.
If nothing else, for the 60 people who are still hanging around watching this, because at this point, like, as long as people want to come on and talk to me, I don't see any reason to stop talking to people, because having John Shea on to talk about, read through, to be able to, I've never read a book and then been like, okay, I have questions. Like, that was amazing. And so now I was like, when I see, because I'm going to finish Abigail's book and then I'm going to message her, because I'd love to talk about the therapy stuff. But like, but again, I also sort of look at that and go, She's a little big right now because she was on Rogan, and so I'm sure she's busy. But like, I've started trying to find authors, and it's actually I am finding it hard. The internet not as helpful as I would have thought. Finding some people, and so I'm starting to wonder if like there's got to be some other way to hook into people, like actually calling book publishers maybe, and I don't know. So it's some people you can just email, and some people you can't.
And some people you can track down contact information for, and some people you can't. And some people it's like via Instagram. Some people it's via Twitter or X or whatever it's called. Some people, through LinkedIn. But the other thing we've noticed is everybody's got something to talk about.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a story. And in a way, I think that's going to be us. It's like, we will literally talk to anybody about almost any topic. I mean, there's going to be a couple that we'll probably draw the line at.
Well, I mean, we're as much because we are in the tech field. There's a lot of that we're just going to sort of set aside. We're going to keep talking about AI because it's so broad and general at this point.
And it's in the news. There's a lot of
it's in the news, and
stuff.
it's I think we're good for a while for now on that.
Yeah, but we're not going to ever talk computers or phones or routers or honestly, that's boring, and I don't want to talk about that.
I don't want to talk about that.
There's other podcasts you can go listen to for that.
I want to talk about ancient civilizations and aliens because that's what I'm interested in.
And Bigfoot, and and the other thing is it's driven a couple of things. Like you and I still talk, like we always have, because we've been friends forever. But a lot of our conversations are now, hey, look at this. Hey, look at it. Like this weekend, you were like, where are you getting this stuff from? Right? Because I blasted 3 or 4 things to you because I was watching an episode, and this is something you and I have found. We're now watching things like shows and stuff that kind of has stuff we already kind of know or we've read about, but there's snippets of, oh, that's who wrote this. Oh, that's who wrote that. Oh, that's the author. And those are the things. And it's like I'm watching a show and the guy is talking on it, and I look the guy up and I send you, the wiki page of who that guy is and the article he wrote. And you're like, where are you getting this from?
I'm trying to pull it up again because I want to talk about it. Okay, so his name was Stephen J. Gould.
Yeah.
And the thing he wrote was called Punctuated Equilibrium, which I've actually heard of before. I knew the word but couldn't put a definition to it, and then read through it and was like, oh, I knew this, but I'd forgotten.
And what was fascinating is like that came off of like watching an Ancient Alien special off the History Channel, and before people are like, oh my God, why are you watching that? They talk about scientific stuff in that has nothing to do with aliens, and you can, again, we're grabbing stuff as we go, and it's like that snippet. Ooh, I'd like to talk to that person, and
and also the thing I'll say about Ancient Aliens, and I'm going to put Gaia in this group too, because Gaia gets into what I consider some woo-woo stuff and some
very
like past life
stuff.
regression people, and I'm like, I don't know about that.
I mean, as much as I'm open to that kind of stuff, they go way far.
It goes farther than I'm willing to step at this point. I would never.
Watch the stuff.
I don't know.
Check it out. Yeah. Watch the stuff. But even for us, that's pushing a little bit, right?
They have a series on there that I think that season 4 is about to come out, which is called Ancient Civilization. And it's sort of one of the things I found early on in my exploration of this, and signed up for a month, watched all 3 seasons of it at the time, and went through it with one of my notebooks. I think I was doing it on my phone at the time, just writing down people's names. Like, oh, who's that guy who wrote this book, and who's this guy who wrote this book, and that sort of built up my library of some of the things that I've read. But I was going to say what's interesting about both of those, and I was watching. You told me to watch the Sumerian episode of Ancient Aliens, just came out.
Yeah.
And there were so many of those things where like this, and I'm like, yes. And they go, aliens. And I went, oh, come on, guys. You don't know it's aliens. Like, I was with you all the way up until you were like, therefore it must be aliens. I'm like, it doesn't have to be aliens. It could have been a million other things.
What makes that show frustrating is because they always come down on it has to be aliens. Now, to be fair to them, there may be just as much evidence it was aliens as it was something else, right? And I once saw that in a special I watched about the Bermuda Triangle, where they were like, look, we have just as much proof that it's some scientific thing as it is aliens. Like, I can't prove either one of them, but they didn't say it has to be this. Like, I understand you've come to the conclusion that it is. People doing the show that has now run for 15, 16 years or whatever it is.
Right.
It's obviously a cash cow for the History Channel, and that's part of why they keep doing it.
I wonder if in the development of that program, what there must have been some sort of discussion of like, okay, we're going to get into some weird stuff. And if we start talking about it being local dimensional beings or ancient humans or whatever, we're getting too close to what it really is, and it's going to be a problem. So we're just going to we want to talk about all this stuff, and we want to get the information out to people for them to learn what it is. So we're going to be like just a little bit of a farce. Like, oh, everything's gotta be aliens. But you read that book about Adam and Eve, didn't you? Yeah, I did, and I learned some stuff. Like, so, that's the goal.
And you just mentioned that, and that's another thing that's been real interesting. And for reasons I'm not going to get into, I've been spending a lot of time at Half Price Books because I've had a lot of downtime every other weekend. And one of the things we found is, while the internet is a wonderful thing and a treasure trove of information, both false, true, and all over the place, it's missing stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is the older out-of-print books, right? Like this one may not be out of print, but some of the gems that got me into this pre-internet, right? Like, some of the old Reader's Digest style books, right? Strange stories and amazing facts. And what I do when I go in there now is the first thing I do is I pick up the big book and I look for the published date and I look for how old is it. And I'm like, oh, this one, copyright 1976. And there's stuff in here that just hasn't made its way onto the internet, and I found a bunch of books that way. I had you look one up the other day that was so weird.
So that's something that I'm noticing. Like, so one of the Y-Files episodes was about a book. I mean, there's been a couple of them where he's like, all of this comes out of this book that I read, and it's
Them and Us, the Neanderthal one.
Well, there was another one too, the Electric Universe stuff as well.
Okay, I didn't watch that one.
That's interesting stuff. I'm starting to see it happening. Like, Ben Van Kerkwijk has been talking about, he's been pulling information out of old books, that they're rare books that are, there's two of them, so, or not probably more than two, but, that there's this information that's in there it's just in there. There's a book that has this information, and that's the last place that it is. On that note, I'm going to change subjects and flip with this. There might be information in some random book somewhere that unlocks a lot of this information, right? You would agree to that, yes?
Okay. Oh, absolutely. As a biblical scholar alone, yes.
Right.
Period, right?
So why do we so quickly disregard the book that was found in the 17 whatever, that is the Thoth the Atlantean story of Atlantis? Like, we're so quick to just let it go, but imagine if we... Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's...
Yeah, I know why
that one does come with that weird story of, like, finding the tablets and stuff, but...
And again, I know why I was so quick to dismiss it, and part of it was I didn't have enough context about the book and where it came from, to be fair. The way the story was introduced to me and the way I got the information was backwards. And I don't mean like that in an insulting way. It's like someone who didn't know a whole lot about it, knew just enough to know, was trying to explain it to me, and I was like, and there was a misunderstanding.
And you knew enough to have detailed enough questions that he couldn't answer.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I knew enough about biblical scholarship and the study of ancient languages and study of ancient texts to ask some questions, because I think there was a misunderstanding, and the misunderstanding that I got was, somebody got their hands on these texts, these actual ancient tablets, translated them, and now they're hidden away, which was not what the actual story was.
Yeah.
There's an old, my understanding now is there's an old text from medieval times that talks about this kind of thing as more inspired.
The 1800s, 1700s. It's earlier. Yeah, it's newer than that.
And it's a struggle for me when somebody's like, there's source material, but you can't look at it. Then I ask questions, but they do have some source material. There are older books. Now, we don't know how far back they go, and I do still have questions, but I'm willing to give it a little bit more. I'm more open-minded about it now that you've read more on it and explained some of it to me than I was in the beginning. And it was interesting because I watched the latest episode of the Y-Files today, and he did the same thing. He was like, I don't like the Bigfoot story. Spoilers if you haven't watched the latest Y-Files, but I don't like the Bigfoot story. I went to the Patterson Gimli film and all this. Like, this is going to be the easiest thing in the world to debunk. And he goes, and then I watched the like high D rendered stabilized version of the Patterson film and went, maybe crap. I can't just dismiss it anymore. It's not just dismissible anymore. Right. Yeah, and so I think that's important is like, you want to be open-minded and skeptical with all this stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful not to fall either way too much. Right.
Absolutely. Well, so I'm in the middle of, all right, so I'm going to take two things and smash them together here. I'm in the middle of The Missing Lands by Freddie Silva, he's on a lot of those Ancient Aliens Gaia shows. He's one of those guys.
He's an expert. He's one of the experts they bring on.
Yeah. And so I need my notes. Sorry. All right. So I'm reading through his book, and basically he is running through all the old myths, just all of them, and they just. I run into this point in some of these things where stuff lines up. So you've got ancient myths from South America that talk about this climactic moment that happens, and they describe essentially comets going through the sky, and the sun stays in the sky for 5 days. Basically, the Earth stops rotating, and the sun sits in and then on the other side of the planet, there's stories of the exact opposite.
Like
the sun didn't come up for 5 days, and you're going, okay. I mean, that's and I think like on one of them it's 40 days, and then the other one it's 6 days. I mean, some of the timing's a little weird, and that sort of. That doesn't really concern me anymore. I'm starting to realize that some of those, numbers take on meaning, and so sometimes it doesn't. 5 days isn't the right number, and 40 days is the right number, and it doesn't really matter if it's 5 days or 40 days. What there is on one side of the planet there's a story where the sun didn't come up, and on the other side of the planet there's a story where it didn't go down. Okay, that's a lot of coincidence for me to just sort of dismiss. And so what I was going through with these and looking at this stuff is we're talking about, I talked to you about this a little bit earlier. It feels like when I was a kid, the argument was we just disregard all the stuff. The Greeks didn't know what they were talking about. The Romans didn't know what they were talking about with their god stories. None of those things are real, and then however far back it went when I was a kid. But also the Bible stories are not real. It's all myth, and it's all,
And see, I got a different
like the
version.
Flood story, Well, let me finish here. So,
yes.
so, and just sort of making a broad statement here of like, we're just going to disregard all this stuff because it's myth. The King's List, it's right, it's made up. It's
okay,
yeah, that kind of stuff. All of it, which is, again, yes, pieces of it are definitely real. I'm not arguing that. But what I am saying is like, why are we've now come along, I mean, here's my list. The Minoans and the Mycenaeans were both cultures in Greek mythology that we didn't think were real. They're only mentioned in Greek mythology, so they must be a myth.
Yeah.
Well, then we found them. Okay, so they're real. The Hittites were in the Bible. We thought they were just from the Bible. They weren't really real. Turns out they are. Same
Troy.
with Sodom and Gomorrah. Troy's another one. Yeah. And then there's the kingdom of Cush was an Egyptian space that no one thought was real until, oh, lo and behold, here it is. So,
and we might soon add Atlantis to that with some of the stuff they're finding in the African desert with the ruins that are rings and things of that nature, you know?
Yeah. So in conclusion, where I'm coming at this is maybe we need to flip the script on the way we're looking at the old stuff and say, okay, maybe we need to look at it and assume that the majority of what they're saying might actually be true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been mythologized. The truth has been turned into a comic book.
Yeah.
And we're reading the comic book.
It's not elaborated. That's not the word I'm looking for. It's been enhanced. It's been tweaked. It's been made more. But there's a line of
telephone story.
Yeah, there's a line of truth there, right? There's a line of information that is the same. And
so when every religion there's two things that they all say came down from heaven and created. So why do we just sort of the idea that something came down and made us, like what if it's not actually just a myth? What if legitimately something came down from the sky and turned us into people?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm a crazy person.
Well, I mean, just looking at one of the books here, I mean, that's literally what some of these Egyptian stories are, is like the things came down and they played with us. They made changes and we now are what we are. And we're finding that in genetics, like something happened. I've heard maybe a retrovirus. Who knows where it came from? Or, two chromosomes fused. How did that happen? I don't have answers.
Cat Williams said it on Rogan. He said,
that was wild.
If you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's so good.
It is not what you expect. It's not
20
Cat
minutes
Williams
in, all of a sudden you just go, oh, is this what we're doing? Yeah, you're doing that for the whole rest of the thing. It's so good. But he makes this point. He played it so coy. Like he told you just enough to know that he's read the book that you've read too. And he's like, I know. And you're like, oh, he knows. It was very exciting for me.
He made one point that was so well made. And I'd never thought about it the way he approached it. He goes, I knew from a preteen that Atlantis was real. And he's like, when Joe was like, how'd you know? And he goes, because the way they talked about it was like, oh yeah, on the way to Houston or on the way from Canada through Michigan, headed down to Texas, I passed Detroit. And then when we drove through Detroit, it had this thing and it had this thing around it. And then we moved on. And then they just, in like 2 or 3 other places, mentioned that, Detroit again. I know Detroit's real. It's just a place. They're not like making a big deal about it. It's just something you passed along the way. He goes, you don't do that unless it's a real place.
I also think he was also commenting on that we all just sort of say it as well.
Well, I took it as he was referring back to like Plato in the story and the 3 or 4 times it gets mentioned in passing.
I heard it as him talking about it being like, the fact that we all just still keep talking about it means that it's real.
That may be part of it too, because
I may have to listen to that part again.
I have a feeling there's a couple of things going on. And again, something you and I say a lot, both could be true, right? Both things could be true. But there's certain things that just stick with us, right?
Right.
As a people, as a human race, as a species, that just don't go away. But getting back to all this kind of stuff, you were talking about this. Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to finish this. I didn't actually get there, which is fine. But it was the thing that Kat said that I really liked was, he goes, there's 2 chromosomes that are fused. And Joe goes, yeah. And he goes, well, then who fused them?
Yeah.
And you have that moment of going like, well, but like, I don't have an answer to that question. Like, so, okay. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, and it's like I was watching I had nothing else to do this weekend while I was working on the house, cleaning the house and stuff. So I had Ancient Aliens on, and they were talking about like the bomber beetle, which when you look at it, looks like a rocket ship, and it mixes like a chemical and a hydrogen peroxide in it, and fires basically rocket fuel at things as a defense. And he's like, how did that evolve without all the bugs if it's just minor changes through evolution? How did it not go extinct blowing itself up? And talking about the idea behind intelligent design. And do I think intelligent design happened word for word the way it happened in the Bible? No, because for those who haven't read it, there's 2 creation stories in Genesis. Count 2 separate ones that are smashed together, which is just wildly fun there. But the concept behind programming information into a database, well, that's all DNA is. It's a database. It's code. We can read it. It's just not binary. It's quadrary. Is that what 4 is?
Well, I think that's what it was called. It'd be quad something.
It's a 4-part code instead of a 2-part
quadnary.
Code. Yeah.
Quadnary.
But it's code. It can be programmed. Whether we get into COVID or not, and whether the virus, to make a vaccine type thing, we inject it into people that require DNA and stuff being edited. We're now doing it.
Yeah.
If we're doing it, people a lot smarter than us who've been around longer, aliens, right, could do it too, right?
Yeah.
Because we're still not that far removed from, a monkey with a stick in a cave, to be perfectly honest. But all this stuff exists, and I forgot where I was going with it. But I mean, it can be edited. Somebody had to edit it.
Yeah.
Or did it just accidentally happen? Are we just statistics?
And so I was been reading Stephen C. Meyer, who's one of the big intelligent design proponents, and I've come to the conclusion that I don't know if I know what the general idea of intelligent design, what that general definition is, but I sort of figured out what I think is going on here. We are so deeply and utterly complicated. Down even down at the tiny level of the DNA, with the little things that walk across the DNA and check for errors, error checking on the DNA, with the RNA that does error checking, with the duplication and the replication. I mean, it's I don't I don't understand how that just happens on its own. And and if it does, it I don't think it happens here. I think I think life was seeded in some way. Like, I don't, you get into the moon stuff and the panspermia idea. Well, either accidental panspermia, where something just slammed, out of, who knows, or some sort of deliberate, because the Earth is tilted.
Next Generation episode.
The Earth and the moon and the spin and the thing. I mean, it almost like because we know the moon's moving out, right? And so the timing, so the moon was earlier, so it just happens to be that while the moon is moving in the distance, the time right now, and the moon's just the right size to cover things. Like it almost feels like I'm imagining like a top, like someone wound up the moon and just sort of was like, let it go, and it's been slowly moving out as it's spinning and changing things, and they like put some stuff in the right places and just were like, and then I don't know, they stuck around and continued to edit at 250,000. They made more changes. I mean,
and if you're someone who likes to see this kind of idea in story form, there's an exceptionally good Star Trek: The Next Generation episode that deals with this, called The Chase, from 1993. Where the premise of that one was there was a sentient species that evolved, and there was nothing else in the galaxy. There was no other sentient life. So they went around the galaxy, and they seeded examples of themselves, like bits of themselves, across hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of planets, thousands and thousands of planets, which is why the bipedal humanoid form evolved so many places. And it's an amazing episode because you get to the end and it's the Romulans are chasing it and the Klingons are chasing it and the Cardassians are chasing it and the Federation's chasing it, and they get there and the Klingons and the Cardassians are like, there's no way. And the Romulans and the look at the Federation look at the Romulans and like, we do have something in common. And then they kind of walk away. And what's really cool about that is then they also use that to lay the foundations for like reunification and all that kind of stuff with Spock. Anyway, it's the panspermia thing in Star Trek. Mm-hmm. It's the Star Trek panspermia episode.
That's Stargate too.
Yeah, in a different way, a very different way.
But they put humans all around in different places, and
yes, but in that one they pick up people and drop them, culture and everything. This one, it's literally just sprinkling stuff and letting it evolve in slightly different variants of the same thing.
Yes, and then there's also that's in Prometheus as well.
Which I barely remember that. I only watched that one once.
I've only seen the opening scene. I haven't watched the rest of it.
Don't
but
bother.
That opening scene where the being comes down. And,
yeah, I know what you're talking about. But
that's
it's
just
not
a really
worth watching.
Cool.
In that movie, people are too stupid to run left or right. So I mean,
that's good. I just rewatched Alien the other day, which I hadn't seen in
good
like
horror
10
film.
years probably. It was really good. It some of it doesn't hold up as good. Some of the monster stuff I was like, ooh, that wasn't quite as good as it could. But like it was great. I really enjoyed it again.
My favorite is still Aliens. The second one I still think is the best. But it's an action movie more than a horror film.
Yeah, it's a different film.
Yeah.
We're gonna go down this route now. I just watched Wyatt Earp last night.
Ooh.
So good. So I've seen Tombstone, I don't know, 6 or 7 times. It was a great movie. That was really fun.
I could watch that. I could watch Tombstone.
Well, it may be more than that. I've watched it a bunch.
But I'm a Western fan. You're not. That's the difference.
I have some stuff. Silverado I've seen more times than I care to. I love Silverado. It's so good.
Yeah.
Where was I going? Wyatt Earp. So I only sort of knew that bit of the story of Wyatt Earp. I've never read a book on him or anything. I'm going to now. I'm going to find something. But so I went in. I was like, I'm going to watch the Costner one. It's supposed to be really pretty accurate.
Tells much more of the story. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was apparently supposed to be more accurate than Tombstone was.
It also had a script, which helped, because apparently Tombstone was filmed without a script.
I'd forgotten that. Okay.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize, you don't really sort of see the thing where he falls in love with the woman who'll be his wife, and he sort of gets rid of the other one, and they don't really talk about it much in Tombstone.
No.
And you realize it's like, oh, she's just like a hooker that he's been sleeping with.
Mm-hmm. Common law wife. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was very common
sort of
back
came
then.
with him. And you in the movie, they make it very clear from the beginning. He's like, this isn't what you want it to be. I promise you, it's not, this isn't going to be that thing. And then he like leaves her and you're like, ooh, that was rough, dude. Like, plus he's also like beating the crap out of people in Dodge City too. They portray him as a gray character, which was interesting.
Well, and you know, we have these hero icons, but to be a lawman in the Old West meant we're the law. Like, you didn't have the rule of law to stand behind, and you had to enforce law on a lawless land. And that meant you might have to beat the shit out of somebody to put them in their place, because there was no prison to send them to. And they didn't deserve to be hung, so you taught them a lesson.
Right.
And he also did that because up until all that time he was a cop in Dodge City and all that, he was only involved with like one shootout where one person died, if I'm remembering my facts correctly. And all the real violence didn't come, like the killing violence didn't come till much later.
Yeah.
But he built a reputation as somebody who can enforce law through people just scared shitless of the man, because you know, and there are people like that.
Dude, that scene where he throws the pool ball at the guy
Mm-hmm.
So he's just like, he was going to kill me. I'm taking his gun. All right, I'm out of here.
The closest thing to that in Tombstone is when Kurt Russell walks in to Billy Bob Thornton.
Oh, yeah.
And, just bitch slaps him.
Slaps
till he scares him 3 times. Leave. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the closest that comes to it, but they do a much better job of it and show him much younger. They also show the fact that his brothers fought in the war and they had all this other stuff. And anyway, they're both great movies. They're both very good movies, but very different films.
So here's the one thing I will say. Dennis Quaid did a good job as Doc Holliday, except that Val Kilmer just killed it. Like,
you can't touch Kilmer's.
You can't.
Doc
Holliday. I actually really liked Costner's Earp. I don't know. I mean, and here's the other thing that I sort of realized is that Tombstone is a really good movie.
Yes.
Wyatt Earp is a really good biopic.
Yes.
They are 2 very different types of movie.
It's like True Grit. I grew up watching the John Wayne True Grit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then they remade it in 2010, and I was really pissed off, and then I watched the movie, and to be fair, as a John Wayne fan, the 2010 True Grit is a much better film.
Right.
It is artful. It is beautiful. As good a job as he did, John Wayne's movie, which is it's a John Wayne Western movie, is a better Rooster. He's a better Rooster Cogburn. Well, and that takes nothing away from anything Bridges did, because, my God, he's going up against John Wayne for the role he won his Oscar for,
Right. Well, you're also talking about 2 different eras, though. What's so interesting about this is that they were both filming at the same time. I looked it up on IMDb. I think it was Costner's film. They had to order all their costumes from Europe to get their costume department, because Tombstone already gotten everything here.
And half the cowboys were working on Tombstone. The other half the cowboy stuntmen were working on Costner's.
But yeah, no. So that was I rewatched that. I rewatched something else the other day. Oh, I showed. We watched Blues Brothers with the kids.
That's a great one. That's a
good one. Good music. Oh, and we watched Happy Gilmore.
Happy Gilmore. I need to sit down, because my oldest is old enough now and mature enough now that I need to sit down and watch Blazing Saddles and Tropic Thunder. And it amazes me that people are like, they couldn't make Tropic Thunder today, and I'm like, bitch, please! I grew up with Blazing Saddles.
I have never seen Tropic Thunder.
Really? Okay, we have to fix that.
I don't like Ben Stiller.
I don't care.
I am not a fan of Ben Stiller. No, I know. I need to watch it at some point. I just haven't gotten into it.
I can't stand Will Ferrell. I think I respect the man as a comedian. I don't like 99% of Will Ferrell's movies, except for Talladega Nights. Because
have you seen the other guys?
I grew up watching the racing comedies.
Ricky Bobby. I've seen it.
Which is why I'm drawn into that, right?
Have you seen the other guys?
No, I don't even know that I remember what that one's about.
So the other guys it's a police procedural movie.
Oh,
but it's
that's the
Will
one where
Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg.
Dwayne Johnson has a cameo in it. And,
they have a big him and
Samuel
Dwayne
Jackson.
Johnson and Samuel Jackson are like the all-star
cop
guys. Yeah.
No,
you should watch it. It's pretty good.
Well, maybe one day we'll watch Tropic Thunder and then the other guys. And
let's talk about Blazing Saddles, though.
Yes.
I showed that to. Actually, I don't think we've watched that one yet, but we will.
We should do it together. We should bring the kids together one day.
Blazing Saddles is one of those things that it's like, I see Blazing Saddles as sort of what we're seeing now, like a pushback to the. It's saying all the things you're not allowed to say.
Yeah, it was intentionally offensive, and it was intentionally as massively offensive as it could be. Because there's a famous story about Blazing Saddles, because the sidekick bad guy cowboy was written for John Wayne. Mel Brooks specifically wrote the role for John Wayne and took it to him And John Wayne read the script and said, "This is the funniest thing that I've ever read. I'll be the first in line to see it, but I can't make this movie. It will ruin my brand. And I'm sorry. I wish I could, but and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but gave him his blessing. He's like, absolutely make this movie, because it was such a farce. I mean, could you imagine John Wayne playing that farcical character? I mean, it just blows my mind that we missed out on that.
Yeah,
it would have.
I don't
he was
think
a great
it would have
comedian.
ruined his brand either.
I don't think so, but I understand why he was hesitant to do it. And a lot of people don't give John Wayne enough credit as an actor. He was a brilliant comedian. He had amazing comedic timing. Go watch McClintock. Go watch Hatari. Go watch any of the few times he got to do comedy. And even in some of his other Westerns, when he gets to slip in some comedic lines and stuff or a comedic scene, it's amazing because he's kind of like, he kind of comes off the same way Arnold Schwarzenegger does in Twins with Danny DeVito as the perfect straight man, right? Yeah. And it's just when he does something, you're just like, oh my God, that's hilarious. It's just yeah. I mean, God, I could go on about these movies and these films and stuff forever.
I'm gonna change movie subjects then.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about something different. Judge Dredd.
Which one?
Both of them.
Okay, fair enough. Well, there's Dredd, the one that came out more recently,
which I loved.
God, I love it. I want a sequel.
I want more. I honestly would be happy with give me another version of Dredd. Give me it.
Yeah, but Carl Urban did such a good job. To take nothing away from Stallone, I love that comic book version of Dredd that Stallone did, which came out very close to Demolition Man, and it was kind of in that same time and feel and genre, and the Rob Schneider was there, and it was just, I mean, because Dredd is dark. If you ever read any Dredd, it's really dark. And when Stallone made the movie, we weren't really ready for dark movies yet. Not mainstream, I don't think.
Right.
Hollywood wasn't doing them.
Yeah, it was independent cause independent stuff would have been, but not mainstream.
But Stallone could not have done Carl Urban's Dredd.
No.
Right? Well, not to say that Stallone couldn't have done it. I think he could have pulled it off.
Yes.
But Hollywood wouldn't have bankrolled it at the time with Stallone.
Well, so it was filmed with the intention of being R.
Oh, really?
And
I did
it
not
got
know that.
cut down. Well, there's a scene where he sends the big orange monster droid off to kill the reporter guy. Yeah. Well, there was a scene where he I think he rips his head off. I mean, there was it was going to be
RoboCop-esque.
Yeah, and there's a couple of points where you can catch some dub lines where they're covering over cursing and stuff, and
I think
I don't know much more about it than that, but I that was an interesting one for me because that sort of got me into Judge Dredd comics, and what is that one? What was Dredd
Image?
in?
Is it Image
no,
Comics?
Dredd wasn't Image.
I have the internet.
But the other thing it got me into was heavy metal. Have you seen those movies? The two heavy metal movies?
The animated ones?
Yes.
Yes, probably before you did. In the 80s. Because I rented them from the rental store that existed before Blockbuster did, when my parents didn't know what the hell I was renting, and watched them way too young. Much like many Gen Xers, not only did I read a Stephen King novel way too early, I watched heavy metal way too early.
Yeah. I watched heavy metal early high school.
Yeah, it was like junior high for me. So pull 10 years off of your,
Right, right. Yeah, those are, and the first one was creepy too.
Yeah.
The second one's good. I like both of them, but the first one was much more menacing. Especially at the end where that little girl, it's all dying and stuff. It's pretty wild.
IPC Media did Dredd. At least that's what it says originally. But I loved
Dredd too. Dredd was great. It played well. It was a nice contained. I think that's why it worked. Judge Dredd, the Judge Dredd story they were trying to tell was a big story, and they did a reverse Die Hard. I mean,
that's what it is.
Essentially.
It was Die Hard. He's trapped in a building.
But they knew he was there. He went in on purpose.
On like weird animated films, did you ever see Wizards? It's the 1977 anime. Dude, talk about creepy, weird acid trip movie. That came out about the same time as the animated Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all that stuff.
Yeah, we were just watching something with the kids.
It's a post-apocalyptic science fantasy film.
Yeah. Well, dude, you probably haven't seen these, but they're all on HBO Max. But the Studio Ghibli, a lot of the Japanese anime stuff, we watch a lot of Miyazaki with the kids, like My Neighbor Totoro and Kiki's Delivery and Porco Rosso. I mean, some wild stuff. The art and all that is just beautiful, though.
I dipped my toe in anime a little bit in the early 90s, but I didn't really get the first one I ever watched was real hardcore Ninja Scroll. Yeah, that was and that was like, yeah. And I was just like, and I was like a freshman in high school. I went over to buddies and he had it and we watched it. And I was like, oh, this is not what I expected.
Ninja Scroll has a wild sexual assault and some.
Yeah, and
it's pretty wild.
It was an unrated film. Let's just put it that way. Which I think you and I could agree, PG-13 ruined films.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely ruined movies. We had good R-rated movies before PG-13, but then the money was in PG-13, which is why Stallone could make, Rambo First Blood and Rambo First Blood Part 2 as hard R films, but then they wouldn't let him do Dredd as an R-rated film because
right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I never really got hardcore into anime. I would watch a little bit of it in college when friends had it on, if that's what they happened to have rented. I stuck more with the cartoon stuff, but anime people hate me because I'm like, oh, I like anime, I like Robotech, and they're like, that's a bastardization American thing of 3 different films, and I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I watched it as a kid. They flew transforming jets. I like the alien stuff. It was cool, and I own it. I bought the Macross series, the Robotech Macross series.
Yeah.
And I can go watch it, on my TV anytime.
Well, see, what I grew up with, if we're going down that road, as far as anime goes, was I caught the very tail end kind of the original Transformers. But I jumped in when it was like Beast Wars. And Beast Wars was really good. And then I actually watched Beast Machines as well, which was the third. They sort of ended it. That's the guy who was doing Beast Machines apparently hated the voice actor for Optimus Prime, and so they killed him and sort of ended the story there. And they may have continued on, but yeah, I bought all those.
Well, there's a bunch of stuff that they've done since then. And Beast Wars, when did it come out? I was looking to see.
Must have been late 90s?
96. Yeah, Beast Wars came out
96.
Like when I kind of started watching cartoons again.
Was that Beast Wars or Beast Machines that you just did?
Beast Wars came out in 96, which is the year I graduated from high school. And I remember it being on TV, and I watched it through college because I thought it was pretty cool. But then I didn't like what they were doing with Beast Machines. Like, they changed it too much for me, and I stopped watching it after a couple of episodes.
So here was the thing about Beast Machines. I don't disagree with you. So I was watching it because it was the best thing on at that 30-minute block on the Saturday mornings, and so I just kept watching it.
Yeah.
And it did start off rough, and then like halfway through season 1, it got really good, and then it just took off, and it actually got really good. Which is how a lot of those like 90s those 90s cartoons, they either die pretty quick, or like they have those really rough setup episodes, and then all of a sudden they go off on like this tangent, and you're just like, like Gargoyles, when all of a sudden they're back in time and stuff.
Yeah, Gargoyles was good from the jump, but
the first couple were a little rough though.
Yeah, but that was like anyway. But you grew up watching cartoons go from a season-long toy advertisement, which is what it was for me. Well, for me, it started with He-Man and G.I. Joe. Right?
Right.
And then Ninja Turtles started that way and turned into a much better story. And while they were still selling toys, the pitch wasn't for 13 to 15 to 25 episodes to sell a toy line. It was you were transitional as it was changing into animation really becoming a storytelling medium as opposed to an episodic thing where you never had to you could just drop in at any point and
so
it didn't matter.
Let me disagree with you a little bit on that. Ninja Turtles was still that same. You could drop in anytime you wanted.
Yes.
I think the difference that you see is with the cartoons that you were dealing with, they were just making up new shit. Just making up a cartoon to make a toy to sell.
Well, they had a toy line. They already had a toy line.
Right.
And they
and
wrote
so they Right. But then they did it the other way as well. With not He-Man and JJ, but all sorts of toy lines. They started, let's make a cartoon to sell this toy line.
Yeah, the best one is like, Dino Riders and stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome.
Starcom.
They all had like one season, and you're like, I want more, but the toys had sold, so
they're not going to make more. I think what they realized was we put a lot of effort into the toy line and a lot of effort into the cartoon, and then that's sort of it. We're done. Well, maybe what we could do is start buying properties to make toys up.
That was one I think one of the differences.
They started acquiring existing IP to make toys of, rather than trying to come up with IP to sell. Let's start making Batman toys.
Yeah. So and the other thing that happened about the same time as Ninja Turtles, when people were like, okay, well, because Ninja Turtles did have a little bit of like story growth as it went.
Right.
Yes, and that was episodic, but it did have some growth.
And that was the benefit of picking an IP. Is that you can become episodic, and then the transition outside of Ninja Turtles is like Batman, where we're going to make toys, but the show is entirely separate.
We got, at that same time, we got Gargoyles, we got Batman the Animated Series, and was it The Adventures of Superman?
Yeah.
The Superman show that came out about the same time, and they all ran, and oh my God, they were amazing. And then
Power
they evolved
Rangers.
into, well, that's a different thing.
I'm saying toys.
Toys, yeah, power, yeah. And then they evolved, the cartoons evolved from there into the Justice League. And then Justice League Unlimited, which isn't a direct sequel, but it feels very much like that Batman.
It is. It's the next season, isn't it?
No. It's not. It feels that way, but it's not. They kept the same voice actors, which was one of the smartest things that they did. They kept the same voice actors, and it might be, but it might not be. There's no like direct line through on it.
I thought it was the next season. I'm looking this up. Not that it matters.
Whether it is or not, it feels that way. It feels like the next evolution of Batman. Because to me, it always felt like the Batman one was happening in the 30s or the 40s, or you weren't real sure when.
Just to let you know, it is a direct sequel to the previous Justice League, and picks up 2 years later.
Oh, no, I knew Justice League Unlimited was. I was saying Justice League felt like a sequel to the Superman and Batman shows.
It was
that were out. Oh, they were.
They were all the same universe.
Okay,
that was the whole point.
Then I'm wrong. Yeah, well, that's what it felt like. I didn't know for sure.
So what that all has to do is that's all Bruce Timm.
Mm-hmm.
Who is doing all the animation and the world
Who's
building?
The god of DC animation, yeah.
And then Bruce always works with, I cannot remember her name. The voice
director
for voice director. Thank you. And she's the one who built this crew of all the voices that sort of inhabited that world for a while. And what was interesting about her and the way that she did recording and the way that Bruce had them do it is that they all are in the same room. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we don't see in like Disney films. A lot of Disney films, everybody sort of records separately. Like I think that like Tom Hanks and Tim Allen didn't even record their lines together for Toy Story. But that's why when you listen to Batman and the Joker, It's so good because they're looking at each other while they're doing it. Like they're actually acting together.
It's also why I really respect Mark Hamill for saying his Joker's done now.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I do this Joker with him. Yeah.
His partner passed away. And what's his name? Who did Bruce Wayne? I'm blanking on the actors. Kevin Conroy. Yeah, Kevin Conroy, who was Batman. Let's be perfectly honest. We can argue who was the best Batman. It was Kevin Conroy, right? Mm-hmm. For me, it wasn't Michael Keaton. It wasn't George Clooney.
I love Michael Keaton.
No disrespect to any of them, but for me,
Adam West.
Adam West was Adam West was my first Batman, right? It's almost like Doctor Who. Who was your first Batman, right? We can almost do that now.
My first Batman was the... is it up there still? I used to have a picture. Where is it? Oh, it's over there. It's that Batman from the 1930s black and white serial. Like, that's what my dad showed me those first. And so those are like really old, serialized Batman stories. But that was my first Batman.
I'd like to say that was my first Superman, but Christopher Reeves was my first Superman because that film came out very close to when I was born. And then I got to see the old black and white serials later of the actor that Ben Affleck played in that Hollywood movie.
George Reeves.
George Reeves.
My favorite Superman are the Fleischer brother cartoons. Have you ever seen those?
I think so, but I had a point.
Okay, go ahead.
That I was going to finish, but I was going to say, and one of the things that I loved about what the Flash of the DC universe did on the CW, the Arrowverse did, was they let Kevin Conroy finally get to play Bruce Wayne in live action before he passed. That was the point I was going. So
wasn't he like a mean Bruce Wayne? Wasn't he like jaded and
everybody had died? He was in power armor and he was ready to kill everybody.
That's the perfect Batman.
He was broken Batman. He was the broken Batman.
That's awesome.
He was Batman from what was the sequel that they made with the clone?
Dark Knight Returns.
No, the clone of Bruce Wayne, the other cartoon.
The
Batman
clone
Beyond.
of Bruce Wayne?
Batman Beyond. In the future, where
you mean the clone of Superman? Batman Beyond. Right. I remember now.
So Batman Beyond. He was a clone. It was broken too. It was that guy if he never got the redemptive character. So anyway,
right.
But the Fleischer cartoon. You were going
Fleischers. Yeah. So these are really fun. So if you've never seen the Fleischer cartoons, I definitely recommend finding them. They're out there somewhere. I know they're on a couple different DVDs, and they might be on a streaming service somewhere. Maybe HBO might have them. But so the Fleischer studio did. Ooh, I'm gonna get this wrong. I think they did the Felix the Cat. I also
I've seen these.
Betty
Boop. I've seen these. Yeah.
So. I think
these
Warner
were
Brothers.
on like when the Hanna-Barbera stuff would be on in the morning when I would watch them.
Probably. So I guess it was, I don't know who it was. DC came to them. I remember exactly how it came to them, but they came to them and said, "We'd like you to do Superman." And they
Superman,
were like,
the animated series in
1940s. We really don't want to do this. Like we're not interested in the work. And they were like, "Well, we'd like you we'd like you to make us an offer." And so they were, and I'm going to make the number up. I might be right. I might be wrong on this, but it was like, they were like, fine, $2 million, which would have been crazy back at that point. And they were like, yeah, okay. Oh, crap. And so that's why they're so good. They asked for so much money to make them that they actually could put in this effort. And so they are.
And it also makes sense why they didn't want to do it because it was during World War II. They made 17 of them starting in September of 1941 going through July of 1943.
And so what's interesting about these I think there was a documentary about them maybe, or I don't remember where I learned some of this stuff, but what's interesting about them is that some of the things that we have in Superman are because of this. For example, a modern example is we get Harley Quinn because Batman the Animated Series made her, and then it became a thing. So Superman didn't really fly before then.
No, he leapt tall buildings in a single bound.
He leapt tall buildings in a single bound. And they came to DC. I don't remember exactly and they were just like, this looks bad, because if you look in the first episodes, he just jumps really, really far, and they're like, how about he just flies? Like, that would look cool. And they were like, okay, and that's just sort of where that came from.
Just like with some of the George Reeves stuff too, that's where some of those powers came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and what I didn't realize, because I like the Arrowverse, but I didn't buy any of the comics because they're so expensive. But I didn't realize, because the Arrowverse has done so far, I think, the best version of best adaptation of Crisis on Infinite Earths yet. But there's a tie-in comic which takes place on Earth F, which is this world we're talking about for the Arrowverse. So they actually tied this into the Arrowverse in the tie-in comic.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because that's one of the things. They brought so many people back for cameos. They even brought Burt Ward to play Robin.
I didn't know
cameo.
That.
Yeah, there's before that Earth is destroyed by the Anti-Monitor.
Interesting.
Dude, it's worth going back and just watching like a YouTube of all of the cameos in the Arrow
I've
versus
seen
Crisis.
some of them. My favorite one is when he went, because I loved Smallville, and so when he went to the Smallville universe, and he was like, "You gave up your powers." He's like, "Yeah,
I'm still stronger than you.
Yeah,
I'm still stronger than
good.
you."
It's so good.
Man. Yeah,
so good.
Smallville's great.
He and Rosenbaum are going back through them all on a podcast.
I heard about that. I also heard rumblings that they may be doing an animated like season 11 or season 12.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
They've talked about it. They've talked about going back and doing the first couple of years of Superman now.
That would be fun. I'd be in for that.
Because they're like, I'm too old for it, but I'd voice act it, And I'm like, I'd watch that.
Boy, I hope that this is going to be a weird way to put this. I hope that as AI image creation becomes more prevalent and people get used to it, that we start to see more stuff going over to animation. You get your voice actors, you get your stuff, but
that's not where I thought you were going to go with that.
That as people get used to seeing art done it's never going to be as good when you don't have it done. But like, people getting used to things that look close to real but not real. That maybe I want more animated stuff,
I do too. And I get, here's how I would put that is, I have been very happy with the modern rise of the animated genre for adults, not in adult film, but I'll give you a perfect example. The animated adaptation that Critical Role is doing of Vox Machina, right? Because that's what drew me into that. And my brother, who I never, ever would have thought would have listened to Critical Role, I was like, hey, watch this Vox Machina. He watched the first 2 seasons. He's finished the first Critical Role podcast. He hasn't watched them, but he has so much downtime. He's further ahead than I am now. Now, he hasn't watched them. He says, occasionally I will like find them on YouTube and watch them if there's a big fight going on. But in his profession, he has so much downtime, especially when he's working nights, that he'll just put the podcast on and he'll have
just listen.
Like 8 hours to kill in a run. And, so if he's not done, he's getting close. But I never would have expected my brother, who is not the level of nerd that I am and never played D&D like I did. I mean, he a couple of games here or there, but to listen to a D&D podcast, right? And he wouldn't have if he hadn't watched the very excellent, and if you haven't watched it, go watch on Amazon Prime, The Legend of Vox Machina, season 1 and season 2. But those kind of shows. And I've really loved how Dave Filoni has injected adult content into the Star Wars animated stuff that is still for kids, but he's writing it for us too, right?
Yeah.
So I can watch it with my 9-year-old, and I'm as drawn into the story as an adult as the kid is. And yeah.
I was going to say the other one, at least on Amazon, is Invincible. which is a comic book series that's being converted over, which is really good. It's
for children.
Not for kids at all. But the comic wasn't either. The comic was an adult comic, but it's, again, not adult, but for adults.
It's for an adult audience, right?
Yeah. There's lots of blood and gore. That's the easy way to put it.
Lots and lots of blood and gore. The same way that I remember in Blockbuster, because I worked in Blockbuster in college, kids would walk up with a South Park VHS, because I'm that old, a VHS tape, and their parents would be like, "Yeah, we'll rent you the cartoon," and we'd be like, "That's not a cartoon."
Oh, I had to do that as well. So I worked at GameStop when I was like 16, 17, somewhere around there, maybe
about
a little bit younger.
About the same time I would have been working Blockbuster.
And it was Grand Theft Auto.
Oh,
and so parents would be, and I'm like, and as a 16, 17-year-old kid, I was playing Grand Theft Auto, and I wasn't going to rat out a 17-year-old kid with his mom. Like, you're fine.
No, but an 8-year-old.
But then you're like, this has, like, you can kill the hookers. And they were like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe not. I'm like, I pick a different game. And that kid's like glaring at you.
I would remember the parents go, "It has hookers in it? Yeah, that's how you get your life back. You sleep with the prostitute."
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's not the only way. It's not the only way.
Yeah, but that is what you would let the parent know to give them an idea of what the video game is.
Right. Right.
Yeah, we turned into those narcs that we used to, but our content wasn't quite the same.
I remember. But there's also a level of, like, I would hope that someone would do that for me as well. Like, hey, this isn't appropriate for him. And thankfully I'm informed enough to be able to be like, no, it's good. Like,
although there's so much content out there now. There's so much content, it's hard to police. It really is. And I'm only letting my kid watch stuff on YouTube Kids when he's on YouTube. But sometimes, like, something pops up and I'll be like, what the hell was that? Let me watch that. No, you're not watching this anymore. And that's on supposedly for kids. And I'm like, no, this isn't for you, right? But that comes into parenting, which is something that we should do. We should do an episode on that, since we're both parents, right? It ties into a lot of the stuff we've been reading. But good parenting is being aware of what your children are consuming, right? And then making the judgment based on your knowledge as the best expert into your kid as to what's appropriate for them when, because it's going to be different for every kid. It really is. I don't know. Maybe you think that's a good spot to wrap?
I think that's a good spot.